Okay. Have you all had an incredible, amazing weekend so far? Yeah, it's pretty powerful. So something else, just everyone turn off or down your cell phones, and let's also take a nice deep breath. Because you are about to go on an incredible cosmic journey into everything from the pyramids and music, but so much more. Because Robert Grant is a gift for all of us. He is so brilliant. He's got everything in his background from science, physics, math, and he's written a best-selling book, Philomath. How many of you saw Code X on Gaia? Woohoo! We've got some of the Gaia team here. I highly invite all of you, get on Gaia, see Code X, and some of the other amazing shows they have. It's brilliant. And Robert really shines there. I had the incredible gift of being with Robert in Egypt once, and he made some really profound discoveries. Were any of you here a few years ago when he got on stage with Nassim and showed what he had seen and found and discovered? Are you going to get into that today? You're going to love it. This is really amazing. And that's one of the brilliant things with Robert. He is so connected to other realms, even other lifetimes, and what comes through him is truly awe-inspiring. And I've seen sculpture work he's done. I really have often, we all joke that there must be 3 Roberts, that he's multi-dimensional, because I don't know how he does all that he does. He's running businesses, he's an incredible, successful entrepreneur, and then he's doing all this phenomenal research. He's a musician and this brilliant sculptor, and so much more for our whole community. Let's all give the warmest, most awesome, loving welcome to Robert Edward Grant. Robert, it is an honor and a joy to have you here. Contact in the Desert.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So good to see you. Okay, are you guys ready? Yeah. You ready to go on a journey? Because we're going to do a bit of a journey today. And we're going to have a little math lesson. You guys ready for that? I mean, I know it's just after lunch and all, and you're like super excited to get into like hardcore math, right? I can't hear you. Okay, here we go. We're going to learn some mathematics today. All right, so who knows music theory here? A few hands. Okay. So if we were to start and make a scale of music, because everything in this universe is actually a musical scale. So start with that premise. And I'm not just talking about what we enjoy when we listen to music. I'm actually talking about what we look at when we see light. All of it is a scale. All of it conforms to octave representations. So we're going to go on a little journey and learn the math of musical scales. Okay? You excited? Okay, all right. So the first thing you do with a musical scale is to start off with a unison note. It could be any note, but let's start off with 432 hertz. Is that fair? Okay, so that's an A note, right? 432 hertz, A note. Now, in order to find the middle of the scale, all we have to do is multiply this number by the square root of 2. So if we multiply that by the square root of 2, who knows what the square root of 2 is? 1.4142. Okay? So a lot of people have seen Terrence Howard recently. Okay? In this context, it's not 1. Okay? It's 1.4142, and it's the middle of a scale. If the square root of 2 were really only 1, then we would have no light differentiation. We would have no musical expression. We would have no sound or light, literally. It's this differentiation and separation, I understand where Terence is going with it, and I think it has very significant potential ramifications. But for the context of what we're looking at for musical scales, the square root of 2 is 1.4142, and it's an infinite number, okay? So if we look at an octave, when we hear the word octave, what do we think of? What number? 8. So if we were to take the square root of 8, what is that number? Does anyone know? The square root of 8 is 2.828. Now if I take that in half, what is half of 2.828? 1.4142. Okay, so if you look at it, what you're really doing is finding the mean value, the center point of an octave, that's the square root of 8, then divided by 2. You understand? So that gives you the middle of the scale, and in music, it gives you something called a diminished fifth. And this is a very not so nice sounding interval in music. So when you listen to Darth Vader coming into the room, it's dun, 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 dun. Doesn't sound so great, right? Because this number represents duality. Duality. So think about that for a minute. When we think of the word duality, what do we immediately think of? We think of the number 2. But what's the essence of duality? The infinite aspect of the number 2, which is really just a compression for an infinite number, that is 1.4142. So imagine you start with a circle and you cut that circle right down the middle. The way you cut it is with the square root of 2. It literally forms duality. Think of this whole circle as an octave of expression. So then from there, we have the diminished fifth, but then we also can take this to give us the augmented fourth. So the augmented fourth is the same value as the square root of 2. It's the same, okay? So now from there, we can also figure out if we use exact integer ratio relationships, we can actually form all of the rest of a scale in what's called Pythagorean just tuning, okay? So then we could create a perfect fourth, which gives us a 4/3 relationship. 4/3. And the perfect fifth would be the inverse of that. And the way you find it is you simply take the denominator, the 3, you double it, and then you make it the numerator, and then make the 4 the denominator. So if we're going to do that, the perfect fifth is going to be 6/4. See what I just did there? Now if I reduce that down, what does that reduce down to? They're both divisible, right, by 2. So you've got 3, 6 divided by 2 equals 3/2. So for the music theorists out there, so far so good? So we've got the diminished fifth, which cuts the octave in half, right at its logarithmic center. You've got the augmented fourth, which is just its inverse, but its inverse is still equal to the square root of 2, right? Because the way you take that inverse, this would be square root of 2/1, and then you double it just like I did here, so it becomes 2 over the square root of 2, and that's still the square root of 2. So that's why it's the center of the scale. The perfect fourth and the perfect fifth become inverse relationships of each other. So you've got 4/3 and 3/2. So then if we go to the major third, and its inverse will be the minor 6. Now you might notice something here. Now in music theory, one thing you'll always notice is that the pairings of these interval relationships will always sum to a number 9. So we've got augmented fourth, diminished fifth, 4 + 5 = 9. The perfect fourth and the perfect fifth, 4 + 5 = 9. The major third would pair with the minor sixth. 3 + 6 = 9. You see the pattern? Now once we get past the center point here, you have this polarity shift that happens. So imagine that major is like a positive polarity and minor would be like a negative polarity. It doesn't really matter which one you choose. We say that masculine can be positive and feminine can be negative, but actually it could be the opposite direction as well. It's just your point of reference that you're perceiving it from. So we've got the major third and the minor sixth. And what's the major third value? The major third value ends up being, anyone know? Comes out to be 6/5, right? And then the minor sixth is going to be its inverse, so it's going to be 10, double that 5, over the 6. Follow me? Okay, so now you're learning music theory. So if we go up beyond this, then the next is going to be the minor third and the major sixth. Do you guys follow the pattern now? So the minor third and the major sixth has also another interval relationship. Does anyone know what it is? Nobody know? The minor third, major, oh no, I'm sorry, you know what, I did something wrong. That's 6/5. This is supposed to be 5/4. And that's 8/5. Sorry about that. And now this is 6/5 and 10/6. Okay, 5/4 versus 8/5. You just double the 4 to become 8 and then make it the denominator, right? The 5 becomes a denominator. The minor third is 6/5 and 10/6. Okay, then the next would be the major second, right? And the minor seventh. And then you could imagine the one on top of that would be the minor second and the major seventh. And then the last one is going to be unison, and then down here, octave. Okay, so that just becomes this becomes 2/1 for the octave, and this is 1/1. Okay, so the major second and the minor seventh turns out to be 15/8, and that becomes 16. 16/8. Oh, sorry, it goes 16/15. And then this one is 25/24, and then it becomes 48/25. Okay. Now, why am I teaching you this? What is the point of this scale? And what does it have to do with Egypt? Anyone have an idea?
I was wondering if it's the music of the cosmos.
It's also the music of the cosmos, for sure. The pyramids themselves. The pyramids are related to 432. So if we take the Great Pyramid and we find its relationship versus its height over its half base, or its height over its full base, and if we also look at the second pyramid, Khafre Pyramid, and look at its height over its half base, and the third pyramid looking at its height over its half base, guess what we get? Let's see if you recognize this. We'll start with Menkaure, the smallest pyramid. Menkaure Pyramid is 5/4. Its height is 216 feet high, right? And if you take that exact number and look to see what its 1/2 base is, it's 172.8 feet. That's exactly 5/4. Where does that match up with? Major third. What does that determine? It actually determines its slope angle of 51.34 degrees. So let's look at the next pyramid, Khafre. Khafre Pyramid is exactly, anyone know the height of Khafre Pyramid? It's a little bit less than the Great Pyramid, right? And its height comes out to be 144 meters, right? 144 meters. And so if we look at that versus its 1/2 base, it comes out to be exactly 4/3. What is that matching? The perfect fourth. So we have the major third for Menkaure Pyramid, and we have the perfect fourth for Khafre Pyramid. Does that surprise you? Aren't these pyramids supposed to be built at different times? By a grandfather, a son, and a grandson? Okay. And then what's the Great Pyramid? So Khafre has a 53.13 degree angle. Only this proportion could yield you this angle. There's not another possibility for it. It's perfect. So the Great Pyramid, or it's called Khufu, has a 51.8539 degree angle. And what does that come out to be? That turns out to be 2/1 pi. Now, what does that become analogous to? Right? The diminished fifth, the doubled octave, and unison. So wait a minute. The diminished fifth becomes our feeling of suffering, duality. And because pi is in it, what does that imply? There's some sort of circle, right? It's almost like you're on a merry-go-round. And yet it embeds within it the pathway to double the octave. And even the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber is 2 versus 1. It's 2/1. It's doubling the octave. The proportions of the King's Chamber is doubling the octave. So it says something to us about doubling our octave potentially when we go into the King's Chamber. So now, does this seem like a coincidence to you that we have not only the diminished fifth, the doubled octave, and the unison notes, but also we also have now the perfect fourth and its inverse, the perfect fifth, because it's inherent to the design. If I'm looking at Khafre Pyramid and I look at it one direction, height over its 1/2 base, then I see it in the context of the perfect fourth. If I look at it as the base or 1/2 base over the height, then I'm seeing it as the perfect fifth. Do you see what I'm saying? It's literally this relationship, or the full base versus the height. It depends only on your angle of perception of what you perceive. Now, it's been interesting because scientists have done studies to find that when we listen to certain musical intervals, we have certain emotional responses. Those emotional responses are what movie makers use to get us in the mood for what's coming next. We use music, so whenever you're watching a film that's about a romance scene coming up, guess what they play? They play the major third. The major third is simply the notes that go like this. Da, 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 da. Now, if I go da, da, and then da, 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 da. If I listen to da, da, that makes me feel love. But if I listen to da, da, and then da, 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 that makes me feel heartbreak. So whenever there's a scene that's going to lead to a heartbreak scene, they play the inverse. That's the same two notes. The only difference is one of them is the next octave up and just played in opposite order. C to E becomes a major third, but E to C, the next octave up, becomes the minor sixth. And it makes all the difference in how you feel. So when we look at Menkaure Pyramid, if you look at it from the context of glass half full, you would say it's love, it's beautiful. But if you look at it from the context of glass half empty, you would say that's a heartbreaking pyramid. Is it not simply telling us something about the nature of time? In the experience of love is the seed of heartbreak. And maybe it's our only difference is the angle of perception with which we're viewing it from. Khafre Pyramid gives us the feeling of loyalty and stability. The perfect fourth and the perfect fifth in double-blind studies at universities. They've found out that these musical intervals do, in fact, catalyze these certain and induce certain emotional states within us. You could do the same thing with light. Certain colors that work together, because we can make this entire scale out of light as well, will give us feelings of joy and elation, and other color combinations will make us feel down. You guys catching what I'm saying here? So what is the music of the Giza Plateau? And so when I started doing this, and I realized that it literally is like a piano, I wanted to know what are the music notes that are being played on the Giza Plateau, that we're just experiencing the music with our eyes of perception. Geometry is this music that we experience with our eyes. And architecture is that in living stone. All this knowledge is embedded within it. And what are we listening to with our eyes? And the sound that the Giza Plateau makes in one direction is da, 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 da. What's the most common thing everyone does when they go to a piano?
Play a scale.
They play that exact interval combination. That chord, a major chord. Da, 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 da. I was kind of hoping for da, 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 bom, bom. But the pyramids are music. How many of you knew this? The pyramids are music, frequency, light, sound, and it's all mathematical. And the way that I found this was simply by analyzing the slope angles. I wanted to know why the Great Pyramid had a 51.8539 degree angle. I wanted to know why Khafre had 53.13, and I wanted to know why Menkaure had 51.34. These are very exacting angles. Why did the builders choose this? It also told me that it's not something that was built over hundreds of years or 100 years. How would I convince my grandson, okay, you get to be the major third? I know it's the smallest of the three pyramids, but you get to be that. Instead, the story we get is, no, maybe the guy squandered his wealth somehow, and so he made a smaller pyramid than his grandfather. The odds of that, very unusual. Now, if we look at the Giza Plateau from the aerial view, another thing shows up. So if we take the upper right corner, so if we're looking from the aerial view, and this is the Great Pyramid. So that would be the northeast corner of the Great Pyramid, and the southwest corner of Menkaure Pyramid, and then this, of course, is like Orion's belt, right? If we take this and make a rectangle of it, does anyone know what the proportions are? It's 11/9. But that 11/9 actually comes out to also be 432 versus 528. So there's always been this debate over which frequency combination is more significant to the other versus the other. Is it 432? Is it 528? And what I'm here to tell you is the answer is both, because they're part of the same scale. Actually, when we use a 24-note quarter tone scale, each note representing 1,000 years of our precession of equinox in a 24,000-year cycle, we have 24 notes, and when we have that 24 notes, then 528 ends up being exactly part of the same scale with 432. 432 becomes Ida, and 528 becomes Pingala. Ida and Pingala, the two snakes coming up the staff of Hermes, which becomes the Sushumna, the sword of Metatron. So the mathematics of this is so profound. I started going to all the other pyramids. I wanted to see, well, what about the rest of this scale? I've got 8 of the 13 musical intervals, but if I have 24 notes, I want to know what all the other pyramids are. And guess what I found? Every pyramid fits in this musical pattern. I even went to Mexico and measured all the pyramids. You're looking at different keys of a gigantic piano keyboard that plays one song. The universe. Are you guys mind blown? All right.
Is there a common design method that connects the large block pyramids of ancient Egypt to Teotihuacan, Mexico pyramids, and potentially all pyramids around the world? Let's start with a grid pattern that has a radius of 1 with circles that you can see here forming the shape of a letter T. Now, we're going to also add one other circle, which is going to be 1/2 pi as its radius. And then we're going to connect that circle to integer 2 position, so it'll be 2 over 1/2 pi. Now this might look a little familiar to you because it matches exactly the slope angle of the Great Pyramid, 51.8539 degrees, which is 2 over 1/2 pi. 1/2 pi being the half base and 2 being the height.
The full base would be
Let's see what other ratios can come off of this and what other pyramids could be created. So we now have Khufu. Let's see if we can find Khafre. Khafre would then take the position of 4 over 3 for its height versus its 1/2 base. It is famously a 3-4-5 triangle. So we can check to see if the slope angle turns out to be 53.1301 degrees. Is exactly the 4 over 3 relationship. So now we have Khufu and Khafre, 2 of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau, as to why they have the slope angles that they have, following a simple grid. So let's take this to the next level and see if we can find other pyramids that might match this exact same pattern, like Menkaure Pyramid. Menkaure would then take the position of 5 over 4. 5 over 4 yields us a degree angle of 51.34019 degrees. This is famously the slope angle of Menkaure Pyramid, and this grid pattern yields us the exact same result. But beyond this, what about 3 over 2, which seems to be missing? Is that the Unas Pyramid that's supposed to have a 56-degree angle, or possibly the Djedefre Pyramid in Abu Awash, which is only 2.5 miles away from Giza? I believe it's one of the pyramids that is potentially missing, along with the 12 over 5 relationship of the famed Philosopher's Stone. Abu Rawash is 2.5 miles away from the Great Pyramid, but sits 90 meters higher than the Giza Plateau. There's another example in Scotland, Cairn, Scotland, built by Queen Victoria herself, and there's one also in Rome. This enigmatic pyramid structure is also a satellite structure just behind what is supposed to be the Djedefre Pyramid that has been long destroyed. So now we have several pyramids on here: Khufu, Unas, potentially Djedefre, Khafre, Menkaure, and the Philosopher's Stone satellite pyramid in Abu Awash. Are there other pyramids that might match this? Well, let's go to Dashur, south, towards the south from the Giza Plateau. Both pyramids there have a unique angle of 43.3417 degrees, which is an 11 over 7 slope to 1/2 base proportion. And we can make that perfectly with this same grid pattern. Now we also will need the lower angle, which is a 14 over 10 base, 1/2 base to the height relationship for the Dashur Pyramid, which is known as the Bent Pyramid. So can we actually find this pyramid in this grid pattern, which is supposed to be, this pyramid is long believed to have been a mistake, The angle was too steep, so they made a different angle for the top. I don't think so. Bent Pyramid is also perfectly matching this. And it's not only that, but also the other enigmatic pyramid, the Meidum Pyramid, that has all of its casing stones, but is somehow believed to be unfinished. The Meidum Pyramid, based on its base, 1/2 base, which is 236 feet, and its height of 216 feet, will give us this 47.48 degree angle. Now let's look at the pyramids in Mexico. The Pyramid of the Sun is giving us this unique 7/4 relationship, and it also matches perfectly inside this grid pattern. And what about the Pyramid of the Moon? 10:17 relationship, and it also matches perfectly within this grid pattern. So wait a minute. We have Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, all the Giza Plateau pyramids, the Dashur pyramids, and now the Mexico pyramids, Meidum, and the Abu Awash pyramids all matching the same grid pattern? The pyramids of Egypt and Teotihuacan Mexico pyramids appear to match the integer grid. How many other pyramids around the world will match this grid pattern? The world is now on the brink.
What do you guys think? So leave this in your mind for a moment. We're going to come back to it, okay? Because I want to make sure this really sinks in. All experience is through sound and light. Can we agree to that? Yes. So it's all stimulus, and the stimuli that's coming at us, we are interpolating. What happens to us is not actually what happens to us, it's what we believe happens to us. And our emotional states are derived based on that belief. And we can't separate our conditioning biases. We can't separate the way we grew up. We can't separate the way that our parents saw the world that also impacts how we see the world. So we don't see the universe as it truly is per se. We see it as we are. Therefore, we live in a U-inverse. What's inside of us is reflected in the world around us in this matrix of mind that's giving us stimuli across sound and light. And we derive emotional states from that. In this matrix of mind, the only thing that's real is how we feel. I have my Apple Vision Pro here. It's so realistic. A few of you got to use it last night. How was that, Sid? Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. And how did you feel? Sid's the producer of my first season on Codex. Thank you, Sid. Did an amazing job. So how did you feel? Did you feel like, after you took them off, like, wait, do we live in a matrix?
That's what I asked you.
Because it's so real, and it doesn't take very long for your brain to make the extrapolation to say, wait a minute, we're living in something like this. And we're just coming back to the start of the game where we created something like this. What a mind trip. And in a few years, it will be entirely indistinguishable from reality. So the only thing that's real is how we feel. So my TV show, Codex, was about my journey of change as we enter a new age that we'll be discovering and working on together throughout the course of this series. I'm Robert Grant, and this is Codex. I've had the opportunity to visit over 140 different countries. But when I went to Egypt and started traveling to all the ancient sites, I couldn't help but notice the numerous patterns that were left behind by the architects and builders in living stone. In 2019, I took a group to Egypt following the encryptions left to us by Leonardo da Vinci, embedded inside the Vitruvian Man, as well as the La Belle Ferronnière, the portrait of Anne Boleyn, the mother of Queen Elizabeth I, as well as the Last Supper itself. We realized on that trip that the Last Supper was a working map of the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. And we discovered, while there, 8 new stone reliefs in the actual King's Chamber itself.
Leonardo da Vinci seems to have encrypted the Great Pyramid of Giza into the Vitruvian Man, along with an exact geometrical match of the Earth-Moon pyramid relationship. Da Vinci has identified the presently known subterranean Queen's and King's chambers, which begs the question, do his upper lines represent presently unknown chambers? The Japanese delegation had located a void space above the Grand Gallery that appears to lead exactly to the throat chakra line on the Vitruvian Man, indicating that where Da Vinci has left us another horizontal line might be leading us exactly to the precise location of another chamber undiscovered. The Last Supper also carries the exact angular reference of the Great Pyramid. In the King's Chamber, I noticed the Alpha and the Omega. On the right wall, we can see the faint letters Alpha, Q, W. W is a lowercase omega. Join me in this journey as we crack this mystery, left to us not only by Leonardo, but other Renaissance and ancient polymaths and philosophers who have been endlessly pointing us to the same conclusions. Everything is connected.
So, how many of you have seen Codex? Quite a few, okay. So I found a reference in a book called Codex Atlanticus, reference 1336 and 1337, that basically is a draft letter written to the Sultan of Babylon, Cairo, by Leonardo da Vinci. It's not disputed that Leonardo wrote this letter. Why he wrote it and what the contents of the letter actually are referencing is up to some debate. But in it, it's kind of a famous reference because he visits a cave. And the cave is actually supposed to be inside the great Mount Taurus. In the letter he writes to the Sultan of Cairo, he mentions that he was working for the Sultan of Cairo in an engagement to survey the great Mount Taurus. Now, art historians, not understanding the cryptography of Leonardo da Vinci, thought that he must be talking about Mount Taurus range in Armenia or Turkey. He references having been in a town called Kalindra. This town Kalindra was supposed to be on the banks of the great river Euphrates and supposed to be looking directly west towards the great Mount Taurus. Now, what most art historians would never have known or figured out was the word Mount Taurus is actually the original name of the Great Pyramid. Bull Mountain are the hieroglyphics for the Great Pyramid. In fact, the Giza Plateau was not called Giza, rather it was referred to as Ras Tau. That's Taurus backwards, just read the syllables in reverse. And it also references Rose Cross. Tau means cross. So Rose Cross is from Rosicrucianism, of which he was a founding member. So now you start looking deeper. The word he used and the way he spelled the word Armenia in the letter was Ermenia, not the way that it was ever spelled in Italian history. Ermine is a reference to another painting that he did, The Lady with the Ermine. And ermine is a weasel, a white weasel with a black tipped tail that was used to make the garments of royalty. In fact, there was a Hermetic order, the Hermetic Order of the Ermine in France and across all of Western Europe, of which he was also a member. This was an encryption. All letters in the day had to be encrypted. And he left it for us. He said he lived in this town called Kalindra, looking upon the great Mount Taurus. The name of the town, immediately adjacent to Babylon, that is still yet today called Babylon, Old Cairo is called Babylon, and immediately adjacent to it is a town called Mahdi. Mahdi means calendar, appointment, Kalindra. And it's exactly to the east of the Great Pyramid complex. He even drew the system of the river and all the buildings around it which was never been found anywhere near to the Euphrates. The Euphrates River, obviously a very well-known river, it does not go anywhere close to the great Mount Taurus or Mount Ararat, which would be the largest of the Taurus range of mountains. And the groundwork that he drew looks identical to Madi, Babylon, and Giza. You guys follow me? Da Vinci left this encrypted. Now, remember, there were a lot of other symbologies inside of his other works of art. So he was there from 1483 until 1487. He was entirely absent from all Italian history. Another thing that connected him that we found was Da Vinci's mother was a slave. You might know that Da Vinci was born illegitimate, right? His father was a notary, a well-known notary, who didn't marry his mother, but she lived in Vinci. And maybe the reason why he didn't marry her is because she had had a history as being a Circassian slave. Now, Circassian comes from the area that we know of today as Crimea. The Circassians were like cousins of the Mamluk, of the cousins of the Ottomans. Right? It would be in that same area around the Black Sea that we know of that's embroiled in war right now. So Da Vinci's mother was Circassian. Well, the Sultan of Cairo and all of the sultans of that day, and this was a very well-known sultan, Sultan Qaitbay, who left many buildings yet still standing today in Cairo. And they're all of a Tuscan style. He built several mosques and buildings there, and he hired polymaths all over Europe in a well-known way and brought them to Egypt, where they also attended the Egyptian mystery schools. And for their work effort, as he compensated them, they also had to design all the architecture of these buildings that are still standing today. So much of Cairo looks a lot like Tuscany. What's interesting about this is that Leonardo's mother, being Circassian, was also, the Sultan of Cairo was also Circassian. I found records as well that this Sultan had trade routes that were open with both the Sforza family in Milan, as well as the Medici family in Florence. In fact, I even found paintings of him arriving for his trade routes, coming by himself even, right, with his whole crew, but coming of his own physical being to Venice. He had very direct ties with both the families that Leonardo had worked for. So it would have been unusual if Leonardo would have been left out of all the polymaths that he had hired and brought to Egypt. And of course, every polymath throughout history has always found themselves journeying towards Egypt. Plato, Socrates, Pythagoras for 30 years. This was his opportunity to learn in the Egyptian mystery schools. In fact, all the way up until the Second World War, when the Nazis got control temporarily of Cairo, they actually closed down one of the Egyptian mystery schools that carried the name, the Leonardo da Vinci School of Mysteries, in Cairo. So there's a whole part of this story that's been missing. So Leonardo goes there, and the very first piece of art that comes out after he's in Egypt in 1487 is the Vitruvian Man. He makes 14 cuts in the Vitruvian Man's body. Who else was cut 14 times? Osiris. Osiris. Oh, if we looked also at Vitruvian Man's stomach, you'd notice he's got some really rock-hard abs. So much so that there's diamonds cut into the stomach. Literal diamond shapes. Cut. I don't know anyone that's got you might have a six-pack, but do you got diamonds? He's got 3 diamonds. If you just look up Vitruvian Man on Google, he's got 3 diamonds. Well, guess what those 3 diamonds are? Orion's belt. And it's actually a land view looking from the side of all three pyramids. Many people, including me, believe that there are inverted pyramids underneath that then create and finish out that diamond shape. If we look at Vitruvian Man's eye, his left eye has a very different pupil characteristic than his right eye does. One is to see in the dark, which is the left eye of Horus, and the right eye has a very tight, small pupil, as if he's looking straight into the sun. It's the left and right eye of Horus and Ra. When I overlaid the Great Pyramid on top of it, then I found that all of the locations of the horizontal lines and cuts that he made into the body were perfectly matching the actual chamber locations inside the Great Pyramid. And right on each of the chakra points, centers. So during the last season, I made a prediction that the next chamber that would be found would be at the throat chakra. But before I did that, I also talked about discovering the Alpha Omega. This is the King's Chamber. I was in the pyramid in 2018. I presented it here at this conference in 2018. And right before I went to the Great Pyramid, I kept drawing in my notebooks Alpha Omega. I knew somehow that I was going to find something in the Great Pyramid. And when I was there, I was standing there with one of my friends laying in the sarcophagus, and I had a memory being there when the Alpha Omega was placed there. And I remembered exactly where it was. And I looked and turned my eyes exactly to where I remembered it being, and I saw it right then. Can you see it? No one had ever seen it before. So I grabbed the Egyptologists that were with me and I said, "What is this? Have you seen this before?" And Muhammad Ibrahim says, "Did you make that?" What? He was scared because, I had the pyramid, on a private visit. It's not on Airbnb, but you can rent it. And so he said to me, he's like, "Did you make this?" I said, "How could I make this? It's like 70% quartz crystal. You've tried to take a hammer and chisel to that, the whole thing will shatter. There's no way." And everyone thinks it's 55%. I'm telling you it's wrong. The actual composition of granite is 72%, and you can look it up right now. It's 72 to 77% silicon dioxide, which is quartz. So we're talking about a quartz crystal chamber, essentially. That's what the granite King's Chamber is. And the sarcophagus is rose granite, which even has a higher percentage. Rose granite. There's the Alpha Omega. Now, the Alpha Omega proportions was also matching the room. The room has a perimeter of the King's Chamber of pi times 10 meters. And in inches, this is 5.605 inches in width. The A peak is exactly 33 inches from the far, what we would say would be the southwest corner of the sarcophagus. And it also happens to be 0.3687 of the entire length of 89.62 inches, which turns out to be 1 over the Euler number. Euler is the thing that limits all wave expansion and growth. It's as important to the universe, it makes squares, as pi makes circles. The sarcophagus fits inside the King's Chamber 137.5 times. Golden angle. And the mathematical constant that's used in physics to describe the fine structure constant is called alpha, and it is 137. And omega is 57.1 when I do it in sexagesimal math. If I make that conversion back into decimal, it becomes 56.714. 56 degrees, 71 minutes, 4 seconds. So when we start to look at this, you go, wait a minute. These are alpha and omega? Is it a math equation? Turns out it is. This is kind of weird. Whoop, can't use that side. So what would be the equation that would be the most mind-blowing equation for alpha chi omega? Which, by the way, is the logo on the side of Arcturian mothership, Athena. Alpha chi omega. There are 3 number pairs that have a double mirror characteristic. Does anyone know what they are? One is 137 and 73. Another is 24 and 42. And another is 57.1 and 175. These are numbers whose palindrome is roughly equivalent to its reciprocal value. So a palindrome is just simply taking a number and reversing its order. So 57.1 becomes 175, right? So that's one way to look at an axis of a mirror. Another axis of a mirror would be just to take it and divide it by 1, or 1 divided by that number. That's called its reciprocal or its inverse. So it's another plane of mirroring, right? So if I take this and use the fine structure constant, which could be 0.73, it's actually 0.0073, but the zeros don't really matter in this universe of fractal. So 0.73, and then I multiply it by 0.571, what does it come out to? This times this equals 0.416, repeating. And what's that? 1 over 24.
Why is it not 137, 731?
It's basically the close rounding. So if you take this 24, for example, 1 over 24 equals 0.416, repeating. So it's rounding to 42. So 24 and 42 become this relationship. And 137 and 73, same thing. And 57.1 and 175. So the math constants of alpha are actually this number. The math constant of omega is actually this number. And then when I multiply all 3 together as a multiplication equation, what's the answer come out to? So let's try this. 0.73 times 0.571 times the chi, which is times 2.4 equals, who has a calculator? 0.73 times 0.571 times 2.4 equals 1. 1.0003. Are you kidding me? Alpha chi omega, which is supposed to be a representation of the universal 1, actually is a math equation that equals 1. Is that coincidence?
It's so awesome.
It's crazy, right? It's totally nuts. So alpha chi omega is a math equation. How many of you can see the alpha omega here?
I can't see the omega, I can see the alpha.
Okay, I'll trace it for you. It's right here.
Okay, thank you.
You see it now?
Yep.
See, our consciousness is about pattern recognition. We are taught in school to avoid all pattern. We even have a name to vilify it and call it pareidolia. But there's no word for its opposite, because that's just lower consciousness. We are here to learn to perceive patterns and realize that everything is encrypted, and what we call entropy is just our ignorance of another name. It's our inability to perceive the pattern that we ourselves left behind. Because if we're going to create a simulation game, it would never make sense for you in your omnipotence, omnipresence, and omnipotence to actually go with all of those powers with you into the game. It would be no fun to play poker. I'm going to play poker with my friend, and I'm going to know what hand he's going to be dealt, and I'm going to know how he's going to respond to that hand, and I'm going to know already what to do. It's like, why even play the game? The only game that would make sense is to dimensionally limit my avatar so that I could actually play for reals. And we are dimensionally limited avatars of a higher self. Yes?
Who carved that? Because you say you remember being there, but who carved it?
There were 5 people in the room. I know some of the other people. You might know some of the other people, but I won't name them. And I was standing there.
You're talking historic.
Yeah, it was when the pyramid was built.
Okay.
So this was a commemoration to when the pyramid was built and completed. And all 3 pyramids were completed at the same time.
But those are Greek letters which didn't exist when the pyramid was built. Isn't that correct?
They're not Greek letters, they're Arcturian. The Greeks got them from the Arcturians. I figure if there's any conference where I could say that and people actually understand it, it'd be this one. Okay, so here's Alpha, Chi Omega. Now, during Codex, I said that this is where we're going to see the next chamber. Above the king's chamber, right at the throat chakra. While I was filming Codex Season 2, which is coming out in only a couple of months now, a big paper got published by Jean-Pierre Houdin, a very famous Egyptologist and archaeologist and architect, who took the most advanced muon scans. This is basically the topography reports that they've been doing to find using ground-penetrating radar type technologies. And he published a paper, and it was exactly what I'd said, that there was a new grand gallery, which I called in Codex the Magnum Opus Gallery, the great work. And there's been a lot of controversy as to what is actually going to be inside the structure. Some were even questioning whether there was another ascent or if it was just a large room or what it was. And Jean-Pierre Houdin published this paper right here, Honorary Architect, Khufu's Recent Discovery, Large Cavity. And in it, he put his interpretations of exactly this. Perfectly matching exactly what I'd said 4 years ago in Codex. So this means, maybe I should question, does this mean that the other lines that Da Vinci drew, representing other chakras, he nailed this one. Does it mean that the lines at the knees represent deep chambers underneath the Great Pyramid? Or is it maybe even a reference to the shaft of Osiris, which would just be a cross-section looking at it as a two-dimensional image, right, from distant looking, from where the Sphinx is, for example, at the Vitruvian Man. The House of Osiris is one of the names that people have ascribed to the Great Pyramid. Because Osiris is represented by what? The Apis bull, Bull Mountain. Cut into 14 parts and then resurrected. Does it mean that there's other chambers above at the brow and at the crown of Vitruvian Man? I believe it does. And I believe we are on the hunt for exactly that. Now, I believed in this so much, I decided to turn it into a game. And we got LiDAR scans from Harvard University that were open sourced, and we stitched it all together to make a photorealistic experience that you can use on Apple Vision Pro and an iPhone called Maya, the first spiritual life simulation game, where you have to go and unlock the mysteries in each of the chambers that really just represent your energetic centers along your Sushumna. As you raise your consciousness, here we begin with judgment and only judgment. So 0 parts love, all judgment. Like we all think we're coming here to earth to learn better judgment and discernment and all that. But as we start raising our consciousness, we start moving into more love. So as we get to the sacral chakra, hopefully we've got some love at that stage, right? Hope springs eternal. So then you would be at the second chakra, so that would be 2 parts, 2 out of 7 love and 5 out of 7 judgment. The solar plexus, 3 out of 7 love, 4 out of 7 judgment. The heart chakra tips the balance to love. 4 out of 7 love, 3 out of 7 judgment. The throat chakra, 5 out of 7 love, and we move into the 5th dimension. The 5th dimension is the love dimension. It's the density where we start to choose love over choosing judgment. And then we go into the next dimension, which would be the pineal gland, and combine that with the pituitary gland to make the crown, becoming the 8th. I just got back from the Vatican. And I'm living such a crazy matrix game. I got knighted there for the 2nd time. And they let me go into the Vatican Library and the secret archives. And the secret archives was amazing because it was full of Hermetic wisdom. I couldn't believe it. I walk in this place called the Sistine Hall in the Vatican archive. And it's a big giant room that looks like an open book. And the book has a spine that's represented by the columns in the room. And the right side of the room represents faith, and the left side of the room represents culture. Or you could say it represents the right brain, the feminine, the intuition, the eye of Horus, and the left brain, the eye of Ra, the eye of rational thought, judgment. And in the center of the room were 8 columns. Starting with Adam at the root. The next column had Abraham holding a compass and a square. I never knew Abraham was a geometer. Then the next column had Hermes Trismegistus. I'm like, this is the Vatican? The next column had Pythagoras. Each one of the people on the columns represented the people that were prophets and or polymaths that translated faith into culture. Hidden in the Vatican. When we start to realize that we're in a universe of our own perception, every place that we think we're visiting in the outside world is just a new opening within us. We think that the outside journey of life to learn more judgment and all these things in our hero's journey is actually outside of us, but actually the great paradox is we're just exploring the insides of us as reflections of our universal experience. No one is separate from you. Everyone is a reflection of you. We come here to learn to transcend the judgment, to learn how to choose love and express love over judgment. Someone asked on my group today, how do you get rid of wars? Well, get rid of the war within yourself and the wars will end on the outside. Be the change you want to see in the world. That's the key. It's the love that we don't have for ourselves that causes all the hatred on the outside of us. Because we attract everything we judge until we no longer judge what we attracted. So that means that if you're an activist for something and you want to get rid of something because you don't like it about yourself, you start blaming it and seeing it in everyone else around you. And you don't even realize that the thing that you're doing by judging it outside of you is only recreating a wave of propagation of that experience over and over and over again, and you'll have to have the same lessons taught to you in increasing degrees of challenge and difficulty until you finally get it. Until you no longer judge what you attracted, you will continue to experience the same things over and over again, with increasing severity. For myself, I was like, okay, I can get this whole idea of non-judgment. I'm not going to judge anymore. Okay. I draw the line at pedophilia. I draw the line at murdering babies. But then, what the fuck? Why is my world all of a sudden full of pedophilia and murdering babies? We create our experiences with our own judgments. The things that you have left still to judge that you don't like about yourself are the things that you attract in the world around you. Let that sink in. So this game is intended to help us ascend, to teach us to perceive patterns, God's pattern. You are God. We are all God playing hide and go seek with ourselves. As Alan Watts said, man's only trouble is we take too seriously what the gods made for fun. So this is Maya. It's a subterranean chamber. This is actual LiDAR scan, so you can actually see the texture and everything. This is the Grand Gallery. Down to, you can even see the graffiti and stuff on the wall, like everything. This is the antechamber. What if the pyramid is just a reflection of what's inside of us? And as we raise our consciousness, we can expand our energetic centers, and then those chambers are discovered. Queen's Chamber. The walls are covered with petroglyphs. I presented it to the Egyptian government recently and to the Scan Pyramids team. Look familiar? King's Chamber. When you're doing it with the Apple Vision Pro headset, it's crazy realistic. I've spent 18 nights inside the Great Pyramid, and now I can spend every night there. I can lay in the sarcophagus, position the sarcophagus right in my bed, and literally feel like I'm there. One of the women that was using it last night had such a profound emotional experience. By going into it, she was almost in tears. That's the chip in the floor where the sarcophagus originally was in the middle of the room. Now I can study everything, anytime. The walls are covered with astrological symbols. Those astrological symbols represent the deacon of astrology. Because the fourth dimension is the heart chakra, that's the nature of time. Fourth dimension is time, motion. The Great Pyramid's King's Chamber is a clock tower. And it takes us through the 24,000 year cycle of time. There's a bull on the wall right there. If you've watched Codex, you'd know where to find that. There's also a tree of life right there. The walls have been scrubbed many times over. The etchings are embedded in the atomic structure. I believe they're done with thought. When you have a thought and you flash freeze water from Veda Austin's work and Emoto's work, the image of your thought ends up in the water because of its crystalline structure. The same also happens with liquid crystal. The same also happens with granite with its 72% quartz crystal composition. All of the symbols that we found on the walls were also found in the Last Supper painting in the exact same places. So by using both the Last Supper painting and the King's Chamber, things that we found, our whole team, I've discovered probably more than half of the probably things on the walls, but the rest of our team members, including my trusty assistant, Eden, who's here holding the camera right now, she's made discoveries. She discovered the bird Lyra on the wall, which is a constellation. In the game, you can actually see, turn on and turn off, the different things on the walls. Now, Dolores Cannon said that there were hidden things in the walls of the Great Pyramid, and that nobody would see them until the right person with the right energetic geometric structure matching that which is on the wall would be able to see it, and then others would be able to see it and use it in our day. It's a clock. The 12 apostles in the Da Vinci's Last Supper painting represented the 12 zodiac signs. The 36 holes in the ceiling represented the deacon of astrology. For each zodiacal time frame within Taurus, you have, for example, Eridanus, Auriga, and Orion constellations. The Eye of Ra on the back wall, and it's exactly in the same position when you match the room proportion to the Last Supper painting to the back wall. In the exact same spot is an Eye of Ra in the pediment over the window just behind Jesus. Jesus, the Alpha, sitting next to the Omega. Omega is written into the garment of Mary Magdalene, and where their hands touch is exactly where the Alpha Omega is on the backside of the sarcophagus. The sarcophagus is exactly where the portal is. That's so conspicuously strange in the Last Supper painting. There's Leo the lion. We've now found 40 of the 48 constellations we intended to find on the walls. And they're exactly in the right positions. So that one there is Delphinus riding a Pegasus, shooting the Sagitta at the Aquila. Those are 4 of the deacon of astrology constellations that appear in Aquarius and Capricorn in the exact right position. When we look at the Last Supper painting, we're looking at it from the viewpoint of the age of Aquarius. What do you guys think of this? So you can actually go through the entire pyramid. Okay. So here's another view of the same thing, just so you can see it much easier. This is where the bull is. It was discovered by Susie. You guys see the bull? And right on top of the bull is a diamond shape in red, marked in red. See the linear lines of it, but there's also an inverted diamond shape that goes within it as well. It actually represents the Orion constellation. The alchemical symbol in ancient times of Orion was two inverted diamonds merging into each other. And immediately above the bull, which is over the throat of the Orion constellation, the face of Orion is in the wall. And it has the bird Lyra right over his nose, almost like a mask. All of the symbologies are overlapping each other. This is what I see when I see the walls. This is the south wall, and that's Ophiuchus, by the way, with the ram's horns. It's a black man who is the serpent bearer. On the right, you see the lion. There's also a king on the right wall, which is the western wall. The sarcophagus has a snake on both sides and an eye of Ra in the place also of where you place your head. So it representing the crown, the third eye. When I go in there, this is what I see. There's DNA all over the walls, particularly on the north wall. Now you're going to say, this doesn't look like Egyptian. Yeah, because it wasn't Egyptians who made it. This looks more like stylized art that is actually perspective art. We only started utilizing perspective drawing in the 15th century. This is very, very advanced. Interestingly, Orion has pointy ears, which was surprising to me. There's a hippopotamus up there. I didn't even know that this was all, I was drawing all of it, and then I showed it to Rob Comber, who's an expert in astrology, and he just wrote a book called The Lost Octave. And he saw it, and he said, wait a minute, Robert, so on the east wall you have a woman riding a horse with wings, shooting an arrow at an eagle. I said, yeah. And he said, that means that there should be also a fish next to the wing of the eagle, just above it to the left. And we looked on the wall, and there's a freaking fish right next to the wing. And he said, those are the four within Aquarius and also constellations also within Capricorn. So then he said, oh, there's a tree of life also on this side. He's like, that's Gemini. That's part of the story, where the two dragons basically bite into the tree. The two dragons making DNA along the wall. In exactly the right positions. King Cepheus, also Leo, also Ophiuchus, and the serpens, and Corona Borealis. All of it showing up here. The elephant, which represents the Hierophant, the hippopotamus, the giraffe. These are all constellations in exactly the right positions. The man of Aquarius right over here, with like these sea serpents swimming by him, the fish that's right next to the wing. And then observers up here at the top, and this is Ursa. The north wall has Ursa, Cygnus, and Lyra, and Dracos, which is down here. They represent in our night sky the four corners of the walls of the king's chamber. They make a 2-to-1 rectangle. There's the two fish. And this is the deacon of astrology. So now we have a cipher to be able to find and see all the things on the walls. We never had this before. So I want to thank Rob for being on our team and bringing that knowledge, because it was not something that I really knew. But all of this is embedded within the plate of Dendera, which is housed today at the Louvre. So the king's chamber is a giant clock, giving us a 24,000 year cycle. And this is what it's representing. The only thing that's different from ours is if the head of each of these constellation is in the same orientation as the major fixed sign, then it goes on that wall. If it's upside down, then it goes on the opposite wall. There's Pegasus. So we have 4 stars that are our North Stars. We're in Polaris now, but 6,000 years ago we were in Thuban, which is in Dracos. And 6,000 years before that we were in Vega. And 6,000 years before that we were in Deneb. This is known. This is not me saying this. This is known. NASA even says this. And if we look in the night sky, it makes a 2-to-1 rectangle, just like the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber. And this is a cycle that we go through in procession over 24,000 years. Half the cycle is 13,000 years. The other half the cycle is 11,000 years. Time speeds up when we're having fun. We've been on the hard side. It's logarithmic. The clock is also based on Orion. When we place the sarcophagus in the center of the room, the 3 belt stars are formed around in the exact same proportion as the sarcophagus itself. It's a 2-to-1. If I inscribe a circle within this rectangle, this orange star, which is Betelgeuse, which is about to explode as well and go supernova, and then this star over here, Bellatrix, is the exoscribe circle intersection. It's all geometric. The poles shift on these axes right here, this red line and this red line. And accompanied with it has historically always been a flood. So this is Delphinus. You can kind of see it. How many of you can see that? There's a woman riding a horse. You can even see the arrowhead. And here's the big eagle. And here's the fish right above it, to the left, with its tail like this. Delphinus, Aquila, Sagitta, Pegasus. So what is this game? I believe that the King's Chamber is a stargate, in addition to being a clock. That each of the blocks in the King's Chamber are irregular in size, entirely irregular because they're a coordinate system for accessing each of those different star systems. It's a spiritual ascension chamber, and the only way to move into the next octave is to abandon judgment and choose love. We're on the hero's journey. We're not here to learn more judgment, we're here to learn love. Here's a tree of life right here. This is the cycle. Time is a Mobius strip. What we perceive as our distant past is also our distant future. As we move forward in procession, we move backwards in precession in equal degree. So we started out talking about the different slope angles of the pyramids, the exact slope angles. The cipher here was to understand the height over half the base and the full base over the height give us the musical interval relationships. This was not known. This is the Great Pyramid, and it doubles the octave when we understand love at the heart. It's giving us the Tetractys numbers of all three pyramids on the Giza Plateau: 5/4, 4/3, 3/2, and 2/1. The 3/2 is just the inverse relationship of the 4/3. And it's exact and precise. These are musical notes in a 24-note quarter-tone scale. And every pyramid in the world that I've measured so far have all conformed to this 24-note scale. Like notes on a gigantic piano keyboard that spans the world over through our ley lines and the Nazca lines and these ancient sacred sites. And the Orion correlation, that Orion's belt shows up everywhere, that China, Xi'an, is Orion's belt, that Teotihuacan is Orion's belt, that the Great Pyramid Complex is Orion's belt. And when we zoom out from Earth, we see that all three of those also make Orion's belt. The 24-note scale is embedded here to represent, when we become aware of it in this matrix of mind, our own 24-strand DNA. That the entire Egypt area with the Nile is actually the Kundalini life force, and that each of the temples on the Nile represent each of the chakra energetic centers of the body of Orion, Osiris, which is all mankind. Metatron is the higher self. Thoth, Yahweh, and the dimensionally limited avatar is each of us. We are all divisions of the number one. Thank you very much.
Tell them how to find you and invite you to next week.
Thank you. We have a galactic future ahead of us, you guys. But it's going to be a bumpy road. It was written on there.